grotesque monsters, a need to lock yourself away from the world, and suicidal impulses. We're not talking about the things you feel when watching reality television. This is Bird Box. Bird Box is a 2018 Netflix horror movie directed by Susanne Bier. It's based off of the 2014 novel of the same name written by Josh Malerman. The novel was adapted into a screenplay by Eric Heiserer along with Malerman himself. I think Eric Heiserer is a pretty good screenwriter. He wrote Extinction, Lights Out, The Arrival, and The Thing. So obviously this guy knows how to write good horror. Josh Malerman is a pretty prolific horror writer himself. Since 2014 when he released Bird Box, he's written 8 other books, 6 novels, and he's in 2 anthologies. Susanne Bier, and let me actually say that I am glad to see more female directors behind the camera in these films that have been coming out. It's really awesome. But back to what I was saying, Susanne Bier, she's mostly known for like romantic and family-based movies and TV shows. Cinematography was done by Salvatore Totino. He's the same cinematographer behind Frost Nixon, Everest, and Spider-Man Homecoming, so he's got skills. I myself always pay particular attention to the editing of the movie and who edited it. In this case, the film editor was Ben Lester. This guy's done a lot of TV shows, most of which I haven't heard of, but he did one of my favorite episodes of Black Mirror, and he did an episode of Electric Dreams, the Philip K. Dick series on Prime. The film score was done by the creative duo who are genius in my opinion, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. These are the same guys that did The Social Network, Gone Girl, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and a bunch more. They also have this side project you might or might not have heard of. It's called 9 Inch Nails. So the movie stars Sandra Bullock as Mallory. Mallory is a strong and somewhat outspoken woman, but she's also a kind of antisocial artist. I shouldn't really have to say who Sandra Bullock is and the stuff that she's been in because there's so much going back all the way to like 1992, I think. It also stars Trevante Rhodes, who plays a kind but capable construction worker. I think Trevante Rhodes is one of the best up-and-coming actors there is. Most recently, you recognize him from the Predator reboot and from the amazing movie Moonlight. John Malkovich plays Douglas, who's kind of a pragmatic, world-weary, grumpy old guy. The always fantastic Sarah Paulson plays Jessica, who is Mallory's sister. Little Rel Howard plays Charles. He works at a grocery store, but he's also writing a novel about the end of the world. You guys will probably recognize him as the comic relief from the movie Get Out. So Bird Box is about a bunch of creatures who have arrived and they are ushering forth the end of the world. Just one look at these creatures drives whoever sees them to want to kill themselves. And in the middle of this, there is Mallory, who is a mother just trying to help her kids survive till they can find a safe place to live. So as you guys know, when I talk about movies, I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. This not being a new release in theaters, I won't be talking about the ugly. That being said, let's start with the good. The thing that I really dislike about a lot of horror movies these days is they feel the need to put a lot of CGI creatures and effects and stuff like that into them, when a lot of times they really don't need it. I think horror is done best when it is a lot of show and not a lot of tell. And I think this movie does that perfectly. They show you what they need to show you to keep that tension high. They don't show you the creatures, they keep you guessing. There are some little hints as to what they may look like. And from what I gathered, they have a very Lovecraftian influence. They're just so grotesque and so disgusting and huge that when people see them, they're just mortified, and I guess they feel the need to kill themselves. And because they didn't have to show these creatures, they were able to save a lot of money on their fairly low budget to do something more with the rest of the film. I think the premise of this film is just fantastic. Josh Malerman actually started writing this in the late 2000s. And because he started writing this story in the late 2000s, this actually came out before all these other movies that this thing is being compared to. But there's a lot of books that I can point to, some of them going back all the way to like the late 80s, that I can say that The Happening stole from. It is what it is. There are going to be similarities in certain things, but people are giving way too much credit to this movie and to others when it comes to comparing things and who, so what, and everything else. So not only is the premise cool, not showing the creatures, not saying what their origins are, saying what their motives are, at least clearly, I think was a nice touch. It really adds a sense of mystery, and it kind of helps keep the tension up a little bit higher, because every time they start to show one or one starts to come near, you don't see it. You see other people's reactions to it. And it really makes you think about, like, what is it? You see, there's this genre of horror movies that I like to call in a bottle. And this is one of those in a bottle movies where everybody is stuck in one place and all this tension and conflict and everything arises out of that situation. It doesn't matter what's going on outside, whether it be zombies or aliens or these Lovecraftian, demons or whatever that are supposed to be in this movie. Whatever those exterior forces are, they are kind of secondary to whatever's going on within this confined space where all these people are. And as with many of these stories, and as it would be in reality, your greatest threat is probably going to be somebody who's next to you in that house, in that facility, wherever you're staying at. And this ensemble cast, which I thought was really great, really brings that idea home. You have all these people from these random backgrounds, and that's because Greg, who was the very kind neighbor guy, started bringing all these people in, yelling for people to come in, trying to save them. There's a lot of really nice nuances that each actor or actress brought to their role. You've got Mallory's guarded pessimism. You've got Tom's kindness and confidence. You've got Greg with his warmth and his optimism. You've got Olympia with her empathy and her naivete. You've got Douglas with his pragmatism and his anger. There are some other actors and actresses with parts in the movie that did really well, but they're very small parts, and no matter how small the role was, everyone in this movie acted really, really well. And that helped elevate the film beyond what it would have been, especially considering, like I said, that it had a limited budget, that you don't see the creatures, that you're in this house for most of the movie. So with all these actors, very convincing performances, it really sucks you in. It makes you feel like you're one of the group in that house or on this journey trying to find someplace safer or someplace to grab some food or whatever it may be. So when someone gets hurt or somebody dies, in one way or another, you really feel it. It really bothers you. Sometimes it frustrates you. So that speaks to good writing when it came to these different characters. There are some fairly interesting parts to this film, stuff that hasn't been done in other horror movies, and I really like that. I won't say what they are. I'm not going to spoil, don't worry. The musical score really adds to the tension and the eeriness, the atmosphere overall of the film. It really helped elevate the movie. You never actually see the monsters in this movie. You only see the effects that they have on people and on the environment. That being said, the effects that they use to show the presence of the creatures are just awesome. When people see them, the effect that happens to their eyes looks so real. It doesn't look like fake CGI at all, and I thought it was really cool. Whenever it happened, I was kind of excited. I just wanted to see that effect again because it's so brilliant. You also have the movement of the grass and the leaves and the trees moving or being bashed over or whatever. So there's creatures there and you know that they're huge. You just don't see them. And I really liked how they showed that the creatures affect people and animals, even subgroups of people differently. Some people, they just embraced it. They became crazier than they already were. And of course, on the other hand, there is the rest of humanity who are driven insane by seeing these creatures. And I think that's for a few different reasons. I think some people who maybe don't have fears or memories or whatever that can affect them, they see these just disgusting, grotesque monsters and it drives them insane. And they can't handle it, so they kill themselves. Other people mention relatives and things of that nature, so maybe they're seeing these really sad, horrible memories and they just can't deal with it, so again, they off themselves. Or maybe these entities are just so beautiful in some people's minds that they feel like they won't ever see anything so beautiful again. They feel fulfilled and they just end it because, they want to go to a better place, maybe where these creatures exist. Another thing that I liked was the chemistry between Tom and Mallory. It felt really realistic. At first, they don't know each other and it's a little awkward, then they're friends, then maybe there's a bit of a relationship or whatever, and no matter what phase of this relationship, they always gelled together really well. So these are two great thespians who really help build off of one another's characters, off of one another's acting, and if they actually did a movie together again, I would want to see it, whatever it is. The kids in this movie were actually pretty good. A lot of people are giving them a hard time, but these are little kids. They're not going to be the best actors. But given the material they had, and given their age, and how serious this thing is, I think they did really well. Of course, they don't have names in the film. Their names in the movie are boy and girl. A lot of times, I really felt bad for girl. I felt empathetic towards her. And there's a couple scenes that she does where she's acting very well. And it kind of broke my heart. I love kids. I think kids are the greatest. I'm a father. And when you see a child sad or upset about something, you kind of feel it and you want to help them. And she actually made me feel that. Speaking of feeling something, the introduction of this movie was just awesome. Yeah, there's a little bit of a slow burn intro that kind of gets you into the characters. You see that Mallory is kind of a grumpy ass. You see that her sister is optimistic and fun. You find out, there's going to be some things on the way, some positive things, and each of them has a different reaction. But from there, It basically just goes all out, balls to the wall, action, horror, gore, fire. I mean, that probably was like 40% of their budget, just that introduction, because there is shit and people and trucks and everything flying everywhere. It was great. Honestly, it reminded me of the introduction of The Last of Us. I like the different rules they had for the creatures. Again, I don't want to say what they are because I don't want to spoil. I want you guys to find out if you haven't seen the movie. Although odds are you probably have seen the movie, because at the time of recording this, something like 50 million people have watched the movie, which is pretty insane. That's great for everybody involved, and I think that's because it's on Netflix and it's more accessible. The movie was actually interesting enough that I want to go out, get this book, and read it, because I think, as always, the book's going to be a lot better. I'm not bashing the movie, I'm just saying the written word is almost always better. Think of any film adaptation you've seen of a book, and pretty much every book is better. Even like Jurassic Park, the book was so much better. And all the ideas they didn't use from the first book, they basically put in all the different sequels. And I think this movie's probably going to be a lot of the same. So with all that good out of the way, let's talk about the bad. Alright, so my first point doesn't really have a lot to do with the movie itself. It has something to do with humanity as a whole. Since the movie came out, there are all these geniuses on YouTube and Instagram doing the Bird Box Challenge. And that's basically where you blindfold yourself, or you blindfold yourself and your kids or your friends, and you guys run around and do a bunch of stuff. Of course, it's really dumb and people are being seriously injured. There's also the Bird Box Dance Challenge, where you do a dance with a blindfold on. At the end of it, you snap your neck. It's really stupid, because you can't just enjoy a movie, you have to do a bunch of dumb shit. So between the Bird Box Challenge and the Bird Box Dance, I now know why these creatures have arrived and want the world to end. These people on the internet have shown me why we must be destroyed. Alright, so enough about the Bird Box Challenge and idiots who can't think for themselves and follow trends blindly. In this case, literally. The beginning of the movie starts out showing you who is alive in the end and what they're trying to do, where they're trying to go. To me, that was a really dumb decision, because it took all of the tension, all of the suspense out of who was going to die. And a lot of that is because of this time-shifting element they did to add a bit of intrigue to the film. They show, back in the day when the thing happened, all the way up until now, and they kind of bounce back and forth till they meet in the middle. To me, they should have just kept the story linear. They should have showed how it started and how it ends, in that order. Don't bounce back and forth, because again, they ruin the suspense. They ruin who dies, who lives, what happens most of the time. And honestly, most of the time, this movie is very, very predictable. Of course, that might have something to do with the fact that I'm a big horror geek, and I've seen movies like this before. Okay, there are some unique elements that I enjoyed, but for the most part, it is kind of the same old thing. I think this has just become a cultural phenomenon because it's on Netflix. It's out there for a lot more people to go see, because not a lot of people can afford to go to the movies, but they can afford like $13 a month to see all these shows and movies and TV and everything else. And I think a lot of people haven't seen as many horror movies as myself or most of my friends. But when they saw that this movie had Sandra Bullock and it had cute kids, they were like, oh, this is a horror movie I can get behind. And I don't got to go to the theater, pay for popcorn and shit. Great, let's check it out. And while they do flush out Sandra Bullock's character, Mallory, they give her this great arc to show, how she's grown as a person. That really doesn't happen for most everybody else in the film. Everybody is kind of what you see from the start to the finish. They're the same throughout the entirety of the movie, at whatever phase it is up until they die. I think they should have added like another 15 or 20 minutes to the movie and built these characters up, gave them more of an arc, so you would feel for them even more, and you would kind of be on board with their journey more. Plus, they wouldn't feel like so one-dimensional. Like I said, you've got an old lady, you've got a gangster, you've got a girl who's going to be a cop, and that's really all you know about them. That's it, the whole thing. And you're just like, why are you here? Who are you? Why do you matter? And honestly, they don't. And something else that I thought was kind of lackluster was the technical execution of the film. Whether it be the cinematography or the editing or whatever, it just felt very like Lifetime movie of the week. I know that sounds a bit harsh, but honestly, it didn't look unique at all. It didn't have like a feel to it. There wasn't a lot of thought put into many of the shots. It was just like shot, reverse shot. And, the typical wide shot, two shot, whatever. There wasn't a lot of movement. I think it could have been much more if they would have put a little more time and effort into the shots. No matter what the budget is, if you have some know-how and some gumption, you can make things happen. You can make them look great. and they kind of didn't do that with this movie. But one thing that it seems like they did spend a bit of time on was the dialogue, was the relationships between the people. But even still, there were some moments, some things that people said that were just really kind of hokey, and they hammed it up a little bit, and it just didn't fit the vibe of the film. Some of the people that I've talked to just didn't like the movie at all because they thought Mallory and Douglas were just too unlikable. And, I talked about, well, it was to show growth and things like that, and they just still couldn't get over it. They were like, I can't get behind a movie that has people that I don't like and that I can't get behind it, because if I can't identify with them, click with them somehow, I'm not going to enjoy it. Now, a lot of times with these high concept horror movies, you have to have that good suspension of disbelief from start to finish, or else it kind of takes you out of the movie and ruins it for you. And unfortunately, this movie does that a lot with some of the decisions that happen and some of the things they kind of break their own rules. There's some stuff that happens with like some bad guys, and one in particular where you're just like, wait a second, why does this person look differently than everybody else? Why were the rules an exception for this guy? And of course, because you never see the creatures, you don't get any backstory on them, you don't get any information really whatsoever except for these little bit of rules. You don't know what they can do, what they can't do. Can they manipulate people in certain ways? Can they change how somebody looks if they've affected them? Which are just some of the questions that were raised by only like one person. There was all kinds of other stuff that happened with different people in different moments that really took me out of the movie and killed my suspension of disbelief. While I did like certain aspects of how the movie ended and the climax, the build-up and everything else, because maybe I'm so used to seeing dark movies, whether it be horror or drama or whatever, it's nice to see some happiness and stuff. It really wasn't a good ending. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. You know what I mean? It was just kind of there. Now, I don't know how it ends in the book. From what I understand, it's a bit stranger and a bit darker in the book. But I think it probably wouldn't have appealed to mass audiences like this did and like they wanted it to. So that, of course, more people would access it and watch it, and they would tell their friends about it. Again, the climax building up to the ending was fun. It had a lot of tension. It had a lot of scary parts and all this. Not like, jump out of your chair, jump scares. Just good tension building and things. But if you sit there and you think about it, you're like, wait, the rules say the creatures can do this, this, and this, but they can't do this. So logically, why were these characters behaving in this way? Because they could have done something different and been kind of safe. But again, this is one of those where you can't think about it too much, and you don't want to be one of those grumpy asses that everybody always says, why can't you just enjoy a movie? I kind of am one of those people. Well, I like the fact that you don't really know what the creatures look like, except for this one part of the movie that kind of shows a little bit, but it's not the creatures themselves, it's something else. I think it would have been good if they had shown them a little bit, or shown one or two, and they could have done it well, especially given the fact that this is basically almost a Lovecraft-inspired film, and when it comes to Lovecraft, of course, you always have these like crazy, huge creatures that are just disgusting, and it's end of the world scenarios, and you get backstory, you get to see the creatures and everything else. But then again, maybe they were just trying to save on budget, or they felt like they couldn't do the creatures justice. Like A Quiet Place. I still haven't seen A Quiet Place, but everyone says the movie is great, but then you see the creature or the alien or whatever, and you're just like, really? That's what they're afraid of? I mean, when the screenwriter has to call up the author and ask him, hey man, what are these creatures like? What do they look like? Where are they from? What's going on? And the author tells the screenwriter, honestly, I don't have a clue. That's kind of a bad sign. This was basically a great feature-length Twilight Zone episode. It wasn't something mind-blowing and fantastic, but it was pretty good. It's like a Black Mirror episode without all the technology. But again, the acting, the music, the atmosphere of the film itself really elevated it to something more than it actually is. Then you couple that with the fact that it's on Netflix and it's available to mass audiences, and you've got a recipe for success. But for jaded, hardcore horror fans like myself, it's alright, it's pretty good. That being said, what was my score? Drum roll, please. 6 out of 10.